The minute hand of the broken clock had stopped at 11:37 a.m. for what felt like an eternity. Thomas knew that minute intimately. It was the precise moment he had let go the first time. He was trying to prevent the collapse, but the universe had already sent the eviction notice. He stared across the silent, sterile room, the fluorescent light casting a cold, punishing blue. He was holding Emily Carter's hand. His fingers were laced through hers, tight, desperate, exactly how he had vowed they would be the moment he woke up 3 years in the past. He had succeeded in the physical action, yet the future still pressed in, heavy and relentless. Thomas Hale was exhausted, the weight of a lifetime of regret etched into the slight misalignment of his collar and the unshaven shadow on his jaw. The tragedy wasn't that he had made the wrong choice before. The tragedy was the dreadful, sinking realization that he was making the right choice now, and the ending remained terrifyingly identical. He saw the flicker of deep red in his periphery, the color of a collapse that had followed him across timelines. And quote, "It doesn't in oppos. T change anything, Thomas, and quote." She whispered, her voice a thin, brittle sound that echoed the future he had fled. And quote, "You're still looking somewhere else, Aaron and oppos? To you? You and oppos. Still searching for an escape?" End quote. And there it was. Not the separation he had expected, but the confirmation of ruin. The cold, heavy band of gold flashed on her left hand, a foreign weight that belonged entirely to Aidan Mercer. The rival, the force of his own destiny, had won faster this time, cutting months of future pain into mere hours of dread. This was the precise moment the loop closed, confirming his greatest fear. The destination of ruin was fixed. Only the path changed. He had used his second chance, and he had failed. He lost her again. To understand how a man could desperately cling to the one thing he ruined, only to ruin it again, you have to rewind. You have to go back to the damp, gray morning when Thomas Hale woke up not in the agonizing ashes of his failed life, but back in the exact instant of the first mistake. Back to the day he chose Lena Whitford, back to the soft golden light of the old cafe, back to the moment he finally realized holding her hand was never going to be enough. Thomas Hale traced the rim of the coffee cup, the ceramic warmth a comfortable weight in his hand. But the true weight, the one that anchored him to this strange borrowed present, was the small, soft pressure of Emily Carter's fingers interlaced with his beneath the table. He had won, or so he intensely believed for the first 90 days. This life felt like a meticulously crafted stage play, and Thomas was desperately trying to remember all his lines and blockings to prevent the previous curtain call, the one where the house lights went up and he was left alone in the ruins. In the first timeline, at this very juncture, late summer, downtown, he had received a phone call from Lena. He had excused himself, and when he returned, his hand, inexplicably, had dropped Emily's. It was a fleeting moment of distraction, one that had branched into a lifetime of cold regret. Now, the phone rang, but Thomas kept it silent in his pocket. His gaze fixed on the way the afternoon sun caught the slight wave in Emily's brown hair. He squeezed her hand, a silent affirmation of the choice he was actively forcing into existence. "You're quiet today, Thomas," Emily said, her voice a melody of genuine contentment that both calmed and terrified him. "Is work bothering you?" "No, just grateful," he lied smoothly. Grateful was insufficient. He felt like a castaway who had miraculously swam back to shore, only to realize the tide was already pulling him back out. He had established the foundation of their relationship with unnatural speed. He knew her favorite jokes, her precise coffee order, the exact color of her eyes when she was truly happy. This accelerated intimacy felt exhilarating, like cheating on a test you already failed once. He was doing everything right, preempting every mistake. But the disquiet was always there, humming beneath the surface like faulty wiring. It began subtly. Events that had taken months to unfold in the original timeline were compressed into weeks. They met Daniel, Thomas's protective older brother, far sooner. Daniel's eyes, suspicious and keen, assessed Thomas with a scrutiny that felt invasive. "You seem different, Tom," Daniel had observed during a poker night. "Sharper, but also jumpy." like you're waiting for something to drop. Thomas dismissed it, but the comment lodged itself deep. He was waiting. He was waiting for the inescapable minute marker, the instant of the choice. He kept checking his watch, often finding himself staring at the face, expecting to see the cracked glass and the hands frozen at 2:47 p.m., the timestamp of his ruin. The clock on his wrist was pristine, but the time in his head was always broken. Emily noticed the jumpiness too. In the quiet hours, when Thomas should have been relaxed in the warmth of her presence, he was distant, mapping out future threats. "Sometimes, when I look at you," Emily confessed one rainy evening as they watched the city lights blur, "I feel like you're looking through me, at someone else, or maybe at another version of me." Thomas recoiled, a cold shiver running through him. She was closer to the truth than he could bear. He wasn't Oppos. Seeing her. He was seeing the future version of her that he had lost. The ghost of the woman who walked away forever. His attempts to solidify their bond only seemed to create a pressurized bubble, making the impending burst all the more inevitable. He bought her the exact necklace she would later wear on their ruined engagement date. He took her to the restaurant where they were supposed to celebrate a promotion that never happened. He was meticulously recreating a past that was destined to fail. The fragile establishment snapped 2 weeks later. The city hosted a grand philanthropic event, a black tie gala. Thomas, still riding the high of manipulating time, felt secure enough to attend. Emily was radiant in a deep sapphire dress, clinging to his arm, the picture of the future he had fought to reclaim. The air inside the ballroom was thick with expensive perfume and ambition. Thomas felt a momentary peace, a dangerous self-congratulation. The future was stable. The future was secure. Then he saw him, Aiden Mercer. In the original timeline, Aiden hadn't and Oppos. T entered their lives until spring of the following year, arriving as a slick business partner who quickly became a romantic rival when Thomas began drifting away due to his commitment to Lena. Aiden was supposed to be a consequence of Thomas and Oppos's initial failure, not a primary threat. Yet, there he was, standing near the champagne fountain, impeccable, tailored dark suit, the confident, predatory smile of a man who owned every room he entered. Aiden was 35, radiating an aura of success and permanence that Thomas, with his slightly rumpled clothes and haunted eyes, could never match. "Oh, Thomas, look," Emily murmured, squeezing his arm. "Isn't that Aiden Mercer? He's the one funding the North End project, right?" A cold dread seized Thomas's chest. The air left his lungs. This wasn't an Oppos. Just a sign. This was the timeline aggressively asserting its original path, compensating for Thomas and Oppos' intervention by pushing the antagonist forward. Aiden was a virus in the system, and he had been uploaded far earlier than anticipated. Thomas tried to sound calm, but his throat was tight. "Yes, that's him. Let's stay clear of the sponsors tonight." "Don't be silly," Emily chided softly. "It would be rude. He's right there." Before Thomas could formulate a viable escape plan, before he could physically drag Emily away and lock her in a protective bunker, Aiden's eyes met theirs. And Aiden smiled. It wasn't an Oppos, a friendly smile. It was a recognition, a subtle, cold assessment. It was the smile of a predator spotting prey, but strangely, it felt like recognition of an enemy he hadn't and Oppos expected to meet so soon. Aiden began moving across the floor, his pace unhurried, his posture commanding attention. Thomas felt the familiar, crippling wave of inadequacy wash over him. The same weakness that allowed him to choose Lena years ago, the inability to stand firm under pressure. He knew exactly how charming Aiden could be, how he could dissect Thomas's quiet insecurities and use them as leverage. "Emily," Thomas hissed, his voice dropping to an urgent whisper. "We need to leave. Now." Emily frowned, pulling her arm back slightly. "Thomas, what is wrong with you? We just got here." Aiden reached them, stopping close enough that Thomas could smell the expensive cologne. A scent Thomas vividly remembered associating with betrayal and final goodbyes. "Ms. Carter," Aiden said, his voice smooth and deep, addressing Emily first, ignoring Thomas entirely. It is a pleasure to finally meet you. I've heard wonderful things about your design work. Emily, flattered and professionally engaged, smiled warmly. Mr. Mercer, thank you. It's an honor. Thomas stood paralyzed, a ghost at his own resurrection party. He realized with terrifying clarity that holding Emily's hand at the pivotal moment wasn't an oppose. Enough. He had changed the beginning, but the structural integrity of the relationship remained weak because he was still the same fearful, emotionally evasive man he had always been. The future wasn't collapsing because of external forces anymore. It was collapsing because the man who tried to fix it was fundamentally broken. Thomas watched Aidan effortlessly charm Emily, discussing architectural nuance and philanthropic visions. Aidan was giving Emily the stability, the attention, the sophisticated presence that Thomas, consumed by time loop paranoia and hidden regret, could not offer. The urgency hit Thomas like a physical blow. He hadn't just returned to the past to fix a mistake. He had returned to a race, and the inevitable opposition had already gained the lead. The peace of the last 90 days was shattered. The establishment was over. Now only the disquiet remained. He had held her hand, yes, but he had forgotten that eventually, he had to let go of the past and stand up to the present. And that was the one thing he still couldn't and oppose. Do. The air in the apartment thickened with anxiety Thomas couldn't and oppose. Articulate. He held Emily's hand across the small kitchen table, tracing the delicate bones of her wrist. But the simple act felt less like comfort and more like a desperate anchor against a rising tide. He was hyper-aware of every minute detail. The way she paused before answering a question, the casual mention of Aidan's name during a work call, the exact angle of the afternoon light that made the dust motes dance. Dust motes he hadn't noticed the first time around. He was not living the second chance. He was meticulously preventing the first timeline's mistakes, and the effort was exhausting. "You're here, Thomas," Emily said one evening, looking up from her book, her expression soft but questioning. "But sometimes I feel like you're watching me from across a great distance, waiting for me to do something wrong." His frantic grip on the timeline was pushing her away faster than Aidan ever could. Aidan, meanwhile, wasn't oppose. Fighting Thomas. He was simply existing, elegantly. He provided Emily with the easy stability Thomas was incapable of maintaining. Aidan spoke of tangible things, investments, travel plans, the reliability of quality craftsmanship. Thomas spoke only in frantic, veiled warnings about potential dangers that didn't and oppose yet exist in this reality. "Just tell me why you insisted we avoid the city library opening last night," Emily pressed one morning. "It was important for my career." Was it about Aidan? Thomas felt the familiar tightness in his chest. In the previous timeline, the library opening was where Emily and Aidan had bonded over their shared love of architecture, leading to months of slow erosion in his relationship with her. He couldn't explain that he had skipped the event to prevent a conversation that hadn't and oppose happened yet. "I just had a bad feeling about that sector of the city," he lied, the words tasting like ash. "Traffic, maybe. I wanted us safe." Emily gave him a look of utter pity. "Safe? From what, Thomas? You are acting like the world is ending and you haven't told me why." The world was ending, but only for him. Daniel called, his voice sharp with concern. "You're back to the old habits, Thomas. The frantic searching, the evasiveness. I watched you yesterday. You spent 20 minutes staring at the timestamp on an email Emily received. What are you looking for?" "Patterns, Daniel," Thomas snapped, scrubbing a hand over his tired face. "I'm looking for the fracture point, the signal that tells me where I went wrong before." "You know where you went wrong," Daniel countered, his voice low and heavy. "You chose the excitement of the storm over the quiet of the harbor. You chose Lena. Stop looking at Emily and start looking at yourself. You're wearing her down with your paranoia." Thomas hung up, furious. He was trying to fix the result, but everyone kept pointing back to the root cause. The true escalation arrived not in a flash of thunder, but in a quiet, insidious text message at 2 a.m. It was from Lena. Thomas stared at the screen, the blue light reflecting in his desperate eyes. It was exactly what happened before, the manufactured emergency, the appeal to his misguided sense of duty, the emotional bait. In the previous life, this text had led to a secret late-night meeting that spiraled into a months-long emotional entanglement. The true beginning of the end with Emily. That took 4 months to materialize after their initial choice. This time, it arrived 3 days later. The speed of the collapse was terrifying. Thomas felt a dizzying surge of understanding. The universe wasn't oppose. Forcing Lena back into his life through magical means. The universe was simply allowing his own weakness, his inability to say no to crisis or to confrontation, to operate on an accelerated schedule. He was the accelerating factor. His fear of losing Emily was so consuming that he had become incapable of providing the trust she needed, creating the void that Lena always filled. He hadn't traveled back in time to fix his choice. He had traveled back in time to discover that he was the fatal flaw. The phone rang again. This time, it was an unknown number. He answered with trembling hands. "Thomas? It's Aiden. I'm with Emily. She was working late at the studio and she's had a bit of a crisis with a client. She needed a ride home and you weren't answering your phone. She said you were busy." Aiden's voice was smooth, devoid of malice, yet it felt like a hammer blow. Emily, tired and emotionally vulnerable, was in the safe, steady car of his rival. He had been so focused on preventing the historical event with Lena that he had failed to be present for the immediate, real need of Emily. He looked down at the broken clock resting on his nightstand, still stuck at the moment of his initial failure. The realization hit him with physical force. He had successfully held Emily's hand this time, yet he had already achieved the same amount of emotional distance and damage that had taken 6 months the first time. The tragedy was inevitable not because fate demanded it, but because Thomas Hale fundamentally had not changed. He texted Lena back, a decision he knew would either save him or damn him entirely. He immediately regretted the bluntness, knowing Lena's response would be calculated and designed to destabilize him further. But he had to make a choice not about timelines, but about emotional integrity. He needed to be clean, brutally honest before he lost Emily completely. He drove to their apartment, preparing to confront not Aiden, not Lena, but the fearful, indecisive man in the mirror. He arrived just as Aiden's car pulled away. Emily stood on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, looking small and intensely tired. "He said you were unavailable," she whispered, her eyes dark with accusation. "I needed you, Thomas. I needed the man who chose me. But I keep getting the man who is running from something or running to something else." Thomas stepped closer, the rain beginning to fall around them. A cold, heavy foreshadowing of the impending collapse. "Emily, I haven't been running from you. I've been running from the truth." "And what is the truth, Thomas?" she demanded, the fatigue giving way to raw anger. "That you're still in love with Lena? That Aiden is right and you are too immature for this." He took a deep breath, the cold air filling his lungs. The final attempt at saving the future required absolute honesty, a risk far greater than any temporal paradox. "The truth is, I'm afraid of myself," he said, the words catching in his throat. "I am trapped in a memory of a time when I destroyed everything good in my life. And I have to tell you why I remember it so clearly." The city was a blur of noise and the relentless percussion of rain against glass. Thomas stood frozen beneath the inadequate awning of a dilapidated building, watching Aiden guide Emily toward a waiting black car. It was the same car, the same gesture of possessive control that had marked the beginning of the end in his past life. End quote. "You really think you changed it, Thomas?" End quote. Lena's voice, sharp and laced with false concern, cut through the tension. She appeared suddenly beside him, shielding herself clumsily with a sleek umbrella. End quote. "She's confused, Thomas. You're acting erratic. She needs stability. Aiden can give her that." End quote. Thomas barely registered her presence. His focus was solely on Emily, whose face, visible for a brief moment in the reflection of the car window, was tight with confusion and distance. End quote. "Go away, Lena." End quote. Thomas mumbled, his jaw locked. End quote. "Why? Because I remind you of what you threw away, or what you can't escape." End quote. Lena pressed, stepping closer. End quote. You think holding her hand makes you a hero? You're still the guy who runs at the first sign of real friction. You always were. End quote. He turned on her, his eyes hollowed out by sleepless regret. End quote. I came back to fix a mistake. End quote. End quote. The mistake wasn't Apo's. T choosing me over her that night. End quote. Lena scoffed, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. End quote. The mistake was choosing safety over genuine vulnerability every single day leading up to it. You held her hand, but you never fully offered her your heart. And she knew it. End quote. The truth, stark and brutal, landed like a physical blow. Lena, the supposed antagonist of the past, was merely the catalyst, the easy path Thomas had always preferred. He didn't in Apo's. T just let go of Emily and Apo's. S hand for Lena. He let go because he was in Apo's. T ready to fight for a complex, demanding real future with Emily. Thomas pushed past Lena, the rain immediately soaking his shirt, mirroring the cold dread spreading in his chest. He saw Aiden leaning in, whispering something to Emily before the car door closed. That whisper, that casual, smooth confidence, was the sound of his future being overwritten. Again. He ran, cutting through the crowded avenue, ignoring the blare of horns. He knew where Aiden was taking her. The Mercer Tower, the place where Thomas, in the original timeline, had been too paralyzed by indecision to fight for her. He burst into the high-rise lobby, spotting Aiden and Emily waiting for the private elevator. End quote. Aiden? End quote. Thomas's voice cracked with a desperate urgency that carried across the polished marble floor. Aiden turned slowly, a smirk playing on his lips. He looked utterly unfazed, almost bored. End quote. Thomas. Always dramatic. End quote. Aiden said, stepping slightly in front of Emily. End quote. Go home. You're stressing her out. End quote. End quote. No, we're going to talk. Right now. End quote. Thomas strode forward, fueled by the terrifying clarity of his self-realization. He wasn't here to punch Aiden or blame the time loop. He was here to admit his own fatal flaw. End quote. You think you're so much better than me, Thomas? End quote. Aiden drawled, his tone oozing condescension. End quote. You think coming back in time makes you special? It just makes you predictable. Look at her. She's drawn to strength, to certainty. Something you clearly lack. End quote. End quote. You Don and Apo's? T understand? End quote. Thomas hissed, ignoring the security guard beginning to approach. End quote. I don't care about the time travel anymore. I don't care about the night I let go of her hand. End quote. Emily stepped out from behind Aiden, her voice quiet but firm. End quote. Thomas, stop this. What are you talking about? End quote. He looked straight at Emily, bypassing Aiden entirely. This was the moment. The full, ugly truth, delivered not about a temporal anomaly, but about his own soul. End quote. Aiden is right. End quote. Thomas stated, the words tasting like ash. End quote. He's strong. He's certain. And that's what I envy about him. Not his money, not his connections. His certainty. End quote. Aiden looked genuinely surprised by the admission. Thomas continued, his eyes locked on Emily and Apo's, which were now wide with dawning understanding. End quote. I didn't lose you that night because I went with Lena. I lost you because I was terrified of being truly seen by you. I was terrified of the commitment, the weight, the real, messy future we would have had. I chose Lena because she was easy. She demanded less of me. You demanded I be better, Emily, and I resented you for it, so I ran. End quote. He took a shaky breath, the clamor of the lobby fading into a distant hum. End quote. I came back, I fixed the physical action, I held your hand at the cafe. But I was still the same coward inside. I was still looking for the easy escape, waiting for things to go wrong so I could say, and Apo's. See? It was the destiny, not me and Apo's. Aiden showing up earlier was just the universe accelerating the inevitable destruction caused by my own emotional avoidance. End quote. Tears streamed down Emily and Apo's face, but her expression wasn't Apo's. T one of pity or renewed love, it was devastating clarity. She saw the man he was, stripped bare of all his time travel justifications. End quote. You spent so much time blaming the clock, Thomas, end quote. Emily whispered, her voice trembling. End quote. When all along the broken thing was inside you. End quote. Aiden seized the opening. End quote. See, Emily? He's admitting his failure. He's damaged. End quote. Thomas didn't oppose. T look at Aiden. He kept his gaze fixed on the only thing that mattered. End quote. Yes, I am damaged. End quote. Thomas confessed, his voice now a desperate plea for redemption. End quote. I am damaged and I am weak, and I can't go back and fix the real problem, which was the decade of small avoidances and half-truths I fed you. I don't oppose. Tino, if I can ever be the man who deserves you, but I swear, I am fighting the man I used to be, right now. This is not about the past, Emily. This is about accepting who I was, so maybe I can choose you properly now. End quote. A long, agonizing silence fell. Emily looked from Thomas, sweat-soaked and shattered, to Aiden, who stood there smug, the very representation of the certainty Thomas had lacked. Emily stepped forward, away from Aiden, but she did not step toward Thomas. She stood squarely between them, the emotional epicenter of the catastrophe. End quote. Thomas, end quote. She said finally, her voice imbued with profound sadness. End quote. Thank you, for the truth, for finally being here. But I cannot build a future on a foundation that required a miracle to make you honest. I can't live waiting for the next moment you decide to run. End quote. The admission hung in the air, heavier than the rain outside. The clock on the wall, which had been frozen at 10:47, the exact minute of his original betrayal, suddenly ticked forward. 10:48. 10:49. The timeline stabilized. Thomas had achieved the one thing necessary to break the loop. He had confronted his internal flaw. But the resolution was tragic. The stability of the timeline came at the cost of the relationship he had fought to save. Emily turned and walked toward the street entrance, signaling a cab. Aiden, seeing his chance, started to follow, but Thomas reached out and grabbed his arm, not in anger, but in resignation. End quote. It doesn't matter anymore, Aiden. The fight is over, end quote. Thomas said quietly. He watched Emily disappear into the rain. He had saved himself from repeating the past, but he could not save the love he had already ruined. He was free of the loop, but imprisoned by his regret. I know that this story is intense, and that is why I share these moments. If you value the truth and enjoy stories that make you think and feel, do the following. Consider subscribing to the channel and comment on which city you are watching from. It is the best way to ensure that you do not miss the next life lesson. The rain stopped exactly when he finished speaking. He told her everything, or at least the truth that mattered. Not the physics of the time loop, not the broken clock face that haunted his waking moments, but the core truth. He was a man defined by hesitation, a soul terrified of the absolute choice. He had not lost her because of Lena or Aiden. He had lost her because he was fundamentally unprepared to choose the difficult, silent permanence of true love. Emily sat across from him in the familiar cafe, the warm glow reflecting in her steady eyes. There was no rage, no confusion, only a profound, heartbreaking understanding. She finally saw the exhausted man behind the tired facade, the man haunted by a future that had never fully existed. End quote. You came back, end quote. She said, her voice barely a whisper against the gentle sounds of the city returning to life. End quote. You tried to fix it. End quote. End quote. I held your hand, end quote. Thomas admitted, his own hand resting on the table, empty now. End quote. I did the one thing I thought I had to do, but I didn't oppose. He changed the person holding it. That was the mistake. End quote. He had traded one collapsing future for another. By holding her hand out of desperation, he had merely infected this new timeline with the poison of his own regret, warping every decision, rushing every event, forcing her toward Aiden because his own fear made him unstable. He realized the true, terrible purpose of the collapse. The future was not collapsing because of external events. It was collapsing because the universe or fate or whatever force governed his second chance insisted that he could not build a healthy future on a foundation of inherent emotional fraud. For the first time since he woke up in the past, Thomas felt a genuine sense of clarity, cold and absolute. End quote. You deserve certainty, Emily, end quote. He said, rising slowly. The movement felt heavy, weighted by the knowledge of infinite failed attempts. End quote. You deserve someone who sees you and chooses you without the shadow of another life hanging over him. Someone who is wholly present. End quote. He looked at her, truly looked at her. The version of her that existed now. The one not yet fully scarred by his indecision. The one still open to the potential of a love that was clean. End quote. If I stay, end quote. He continued, the words scraping his throat, end quote. I will ruin you. I will project the ghost of my failure onto everything we build. I know this because I have seen it happen 1,000 times, even when I thought I was fixing it. End quote. The only way to ensure her future was stable, happy, and free from the relentless cycle of regret was to remove the constant volatile element, himself. The ultimate choice was not to hold her hand, but to finally let go permanently for her sake. This was the tragedy. He had successfully corrected the external symptom only to discover that the necessary correction required an act of far greater internal sacrifice. He had to voluntarily forfeit the prize he had risked everything to reclaim. He reached across the table, not to take her hand, but to briefly touch her cheek, a fleeting contact that conveyed the depth of his broken affection and eternal regret. End quote. Go find the love that chooses you first, Emily. The one that doesn't and oppose. T need to travel through time to realize your worth. End quote. He turned and walked away. He didn't and oppose. T looked back. The moment he stepped out of the warm light of the cafe and into the cooling afternoon air, the world around him seemed to solidify. The chaotic static that had plagued his second chance vanished. The timeline stabilized, not into the future he desired, but into the one she deserved. He would never know the details. Would she find Aiden, who was undeniably stable, even if possessive? Would she find a complete stranger? It didn't and oppose. Matter. What mattered was that Thomas Hale, the man trapped in the cycle of indecision, had finally made a choice rooted not in self-interest, but in genuine, painful, selfless love. The final collapse was his own internal one. He had achieved salvation for her, condemning himself to an eternity of knowing what he gave up. He had the memory of her hand, the memory of her smile, and the crushing weight of knowing that this time, he had walked away not because of a moment of weakness, but because of a final, necessary strength. He found himself later that night, perhaps hours later, perhaps years later. Time no longer seemed a straight line for him. Sitting alone in his original, desolate apartment. The broken clock on the wall was gone. There was silence. The phone did not ring. The only sound was the hollow echo of his own breath. He went back in time, he held her hand again, and still he watched his future collapse. The moral of Thomas Hale's story is not about fate versus free will. It is about self-awareness versus self-destruction. We often focus on fixing the external symptoms of our deepest failures. The mistake we made, the job we quit, the person we let walk away. Thomas proved that you can literally rewind the tape and correct the moment of action. But if you do not correct the pattern of thought, the underlying weakness, the collapse is inevitable. Regret is a dangerous thing. Convinces us that if we could just change that one single moment, everything would be perfect. Thomas's tragedy proves otherwise. His failure was not the second he let go of Emily's hand. His failure was in the years of indecision and fear that led up to that second. The time travel was a mirror, reflecting that no matter how many chances he got, the flaw was woven into the fabric of his own making. The story teaches us that true change demands more than correcting a past action. It demands the painful, total reconstruction of the self who made that mistake. And sometimes, the only way to truly save what you love is to recognize that your presence is the greatest threat to its well-being. The ultimate act of love can be the acceptance of loss, the sacrifice of your own happiness for the stability of theirs. Thomas is now left in the silence, a quiet, eternal prison of memory, knowing that the cost of her happiness was his permanent exile. He saved her future by destroying his own present. That is the nature of unavoidable regret. Now, I want to know from you. Comment here in Baxo. Qual tiria sido a sua escala no meu lugar? Você tiria fido esse sacrificio? E se você gosta de fines surpreendentes? Eu dixi outro video aqui ao lado. A uma historia chocante. Clica lá. A gente se encontra no próximo video.